Hello, everyone. I'm Matt, and welcome back to The Amateur Writer. Characters are the most important part of a story. If we don't care about the characters in the story, we're not going to be inclined to care about anything else that happens in the story. A fight scene is going to be meaningless if we don't care who lives and who dies. A love plot is not going to be interesting if we don't care about either of the protagonists. Even a friendship plot is not going to work if we find the characters involved uninteresting. But how do you craft a good character? What is the traits of a good character? How do you make a character that stands out and is not just a cardboard cutout in your story? So I'm going to review 10 tips and ways that you can make your characters interesting in your story. Number one, don't write them to a role. A lot of times when characters go wrong, it's because we are writing them to a role. They say, like, this is the protagonist. He is a character from a fantasy story. So he has a sword, he has shoulder length long hair, he's white, and he has this long lost king, etc. This character is the goofy sidekick. He is a goofball and just has fun. He's comedic relief. This character is the love interest. That is her role in the story, or if you're doing a dystopian story, his role. So basically, he or she is the one who's being saved all the time, who is maybe really handsome or really pretty. And so, but these are all stereotypes. These are not unique features. And this is kind of a big deal because when you write a story, characters are supposed to reflect individuals in reality. And in reality, there is no protagonist personality type, love interest personality type, goofy sidekick personality type. In real life, each individual is the protagonist of their own story. And so if you write a character to a role, it feels stilted because there's one character that is supposed to be the main person in the story, and everyone else is a side character. This is a big problem because if you're trying to make everyone individualistic and unique, it is going to be very hard to do if you're writing them to a role. A good example of this is Harry Potter, where we have the clever girl, the fantasy protagonist, and the goofy side character. So you want to avoid those types of things. You don't want to fall into the stereotypes of having them be your protagonists, their side characters, love interests, fall into a unique role. They have to be unique and interesting. So you need to make them unique. Number two, give them a personality. Oftentimes when we describe characters, we describe them by their physical traits and abilities or skills. But that doesn't tell us who they are. Saying that someone is a good sword fighter and a good leader doesn't really tell us about his or her personality. Saying that this person is a dystopian protagonist doesn't tell us what the character's personality type is. Saying that this person is a fantasy protagonist or a contemporary protagonist or a sci-fi protagonist doesn't really tell us anything about their personality. When we describe someone as beautiful and clever and funny, that doesn't really tell us anything. So what you need to do is you need to write your character to a personality. There are several great resources that you can use for this, but there are 3 personality types that I have found particularly interesting. One is the DISC test, which is a type of test that actually people in business often use, and it measures your personality dynamic within a business. Dave Ramsey talks about this in a business book, which I thought was really interesting, where he describes the different personality types as linked to different animal species. It's a very interesting personality test. Not one I use very often, but it's very interesting. Another one is the Enneagram. The Enneagram is really good and really helpful because it actually on their website has subsets for a certain personality type's generic basic want, and basic fear, their key motivations, and the different things that they are good at. Abbie Emmons talks about the Enneagram in her writing channel, and I'm going to attach a link to that in the description. Then there is the MBTI, or Myers-Briggs personality test. This is a 16 personality test, which is very interesting. And while it's not as deep as the Enneagram, there are some strengths to having to this personality test. For example, one of the biggest key advantages of this test is that there is actually a Myers-Briggs database where they group different characters and real people by their personalities. And so you can actually search one of your favorite stories, say like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or The Hunger Games, and even books like the Stormlight Archive or Gregor the Overlander. And you can search those books on this website, which I'm going to attach a link to in the description, and you can see the personality types of the different characters in that story. Now, again, we can't really tell that I'm a little leery about the real life people because we don't actually know if that's really their personality. But the character database, thumbs up on that. So, all this to say, you want to give your characters a personality. Whether you use the DISC test, the Enneagram test, or the Myers-Briggs test, you need to write your character to a personality. Don't write them to a role. Saying that this girl is a dystopian protagonist doesn't tell us anything different about this girl as opposed to different protagonists from other dystopian stories. Make us understand who they are, not based by their skills and abilities or physical traits, such as hair color or ethnicity. Tell us who they are based on their personality. Okay, tip number 3. Give them an interesting trait or feature. One way to make a character stand out is to give them interesting detail about them. Now, may seem a little bit hard to understand, especially because I just said in the earlier tip, you don't want to write them according to their physical traits or skills and abilities. But sometimes sometimes it's good to have different unique traits and abilities because it helps break us out of the mold. For example, Batman, the White Knight, who is in dark armor, is an interesting trait. But there also are other things that you can use to make somebody, say, interesting. For example, a character who is a scholar but who likes defense, or someone who is a soldier but who is into medicine. You could say someone who is a character who is an intellectual, or let's say a character who is a street thief who actually genuinely, likes people. Other examples of this are, there are other examples of this as well. In Lord of the Rings, the character who I find more interesting among the female characters is Éowyn. I like her more than Aragorn's love interest Arwen because Éowyn is a shield maiden. She has trained to use a sword. She has skills. She has competency. Arwen kind of is just a pretty face, and you might debate on that fact, but she is just a pretty face, whereas Éowyn is also a warrior. She struggles with a form of depression, and she is wrestling with the fact that she can't fight when all the people that she loves and cares about are going off to war. So that makes that is an interesting feature and trait about Éowyn that makes her interesting. Of course, there are other more superficial ones like Toph from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where she's a blind bender, and that really makes it interesting. Another character who has a disability is Hawkeye when he is deaf. Or another shout out to the blind community, Daredevil, a character who lost his sight and has enhanced hearing and reflexes. Another one is Professor Xavier from the X-Men in his wheelchair. So sometimes having different traits in the story can make the story more interesting. Again, Batman, the character who looks like a dark gothic character who's bringing brutal justice to the street criminals of Gotham, but who underneath is actually a more moral leader than Harvey Dent, who in the Batman films gets turned into the villain Two-Face. So you want to and it doesn't have to just be physical traits or presentations. It can also be unique little things about their character. For example, giving your character a little quirk, like the fact that they stutter, or giving them a unique interest that is kind of outside their field can make the character really, really interesting. One interesting traits that you can find in one book characters in Gregor the Overlander. I really like that series, recommend that series, read that series. In Gregor the Overlander, we are not just following the story of an 11-year-old boy who fell down a grate into a strange underground land, but we're following a 11-year-old boy who's trying to take care of his 2-year-old sister. This makes the story more interesting than if it was just Gregor alone who fell down the grate. The fact that he is having to care for someone and protect someone makes him way more interesting. Okay, tip number 4, break stereotypes, followed by tip number 5, which is don't break stereotypes. Then I know this sounds oxymoronic, but hear me out. Sometimes where stories go wrong is because they follow the stereotypes too closely. Again, seeing tip 1, don't write your character to a role. So writing someone into a stereotype of they're the love interest, they're the goofy side character, they're the wise mentor character, they are the antagonistic mentor character, etc., or they are even the villain, is sometimes not a great way to write your story. But you can go the wrong way as well. Swing the pendulum too far, and then you are writing just for the sake of subverting people's expectations. So while it's effective to have a Hans of the Southern Isles in Frozen, who is, you think he's the good guy, but then you find out he's the bad guy, there are times when subverting the expectations doesn't work so well. So, for example, Rings of Power, where we have conscientious objecting orcs, or where we have a story where we find out that the Skrulls really aren't that bad; they're just misunderstood. All these types of things are sometimes the wrong decision for your story. So, you want to ask yourself, what is this subversion supposed to do? Is there a point in having this character break expectations somehow? So a good example of this is actually from Brandon Sanderson's story, White Sands. I haven't read White Sands all the way to the end, so I'll just claim that. But there's this character in it named Ace, who is a female police officer in this fantasy world. And what's interesting about Ace is not that she is a rough and tumble macho woman who looks like she could throw 100 pounds like that really lame excuse for a Hulk and the She-Hulk franchise, but she is just a ordinary woman. She is a good fighter, but she's also a wife and a mother. And this is very, very interesting because you don't expect people who are cool and kick butt to necessarily be mothers, but they can. So that is a good subversion of the stereotype. Having someone who, though, like Galadriel in the Rings of Power, where basically her main trait is just pile driving through problems, is not going to be generically as interesting. But because we're subverting tropes with no really personality behind it. But when you have a personality and you are a personality for a character, you can break stereotypes in a much more interesting way. Also, touching on this, if you are breaking the stereotype that, oh, the wise old mentor character turned out to be a fool, and now we are going to be rebelling against the world system. That might be an interesting story, but it might not be a good, interesting story, especially if you're subverting areas all over the place. For say that you're subverting the expectation of the male protagonist is inherently stupid while the female protagonist is enlightened, or the person that you thought was the good guy turns out to be the bad guy, and the person that you thought was this evil Dark Lord Sauron character is actually the good guy, and you have to invert all this thing. Sometimes that's just too much. Sometimes you want to subvert fewer expectations than more. So again, there are times when you want to break expectations. I love stories that break expectations. I liked the twist in Frozen. But if you are breaking expectations right and left, you can genuinely annoy people, especially if you're just breaking stereotypes for the sake of breaking stereotypes. Again, breaking a stereotype is not a personality. Write your character to her personality, and we'll be interested to see the ways they subvert expectations, like the fact that they are a woman who is married and has a child, and who is still a really kick-butt character. We'll find that more interesting than the green attorney at law who can lob rocks 100 miles, or from the or from the captain who is or from the space captain who could shoot lasers out of her hands and really has all the personality of a plank of wood. Okay, tip number 6: give them something to fight for. Characters who want something are more interesting than characters who don't want something. A lot of times when characters go wrong is because we don't really understand why they are fighting. We might find it interesting to see a martial arts character pile driving through a bunch of ninjas, or we might find it interesting to see a superhero smash through a bunch of buildings. But if we don't know why they are fighting, we won't feel a connection with them as much as if you tell us why it is they're fighting. Saying I'm going to save the world is not really a good motivation. You want to show us why do they want to save the world? Why are they doing this? Why do they have this motivation to overcome their selfishness instead of using their powers, their gifts, and abilities for themselves? Giving a character something to fight for is going to make them more inspiring, and it's going to make us root for them as a character. Whereas just giving us the bland explanation, I'm doing the right thing because it's the right thing, is generally not going to make us as interested in the character. Not to rag on the character, but Superman is more of the example of I do the right thing because of the right thing. Batman is more interesting though because he is a character who, why are you doing the right thing? Because my parents died and I don't want anyone to go through that ever again. Tip number 7: give them someone to fight for. If you give your character someone to fight for, that will make them more interesting. This doesn't have to be a love interest, by the way. This could be their 2-year-old sister who they fell down into the underworld with. It could, or underland, I should say. Another thing that could get giving them someone like Kaladin Stormlight Archive, the people that are in his bridge crew, Batman, the people of Gotham City, giving or is of course family, giving some like Maximus and Gladiator, giving a character someone to fight for will make them a lot more interesting than if you just tell us again, I'm doing the right thing because it's the right thing. It makes them more personal. And if you actually, there's also an added bonus, which is if you add characters in this your main protagonist's life, we are going to see that they're likable. It's going to boost their likability, and we're going to think, well, someone likes them, maybe I'll like them too. Tip number 8: give them a weakness. A lot of times when characters go wrong, it's because they don't have any weaknesses. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing bad with a really kick-butt or powerful character, but they are interesting if they don't have some area of their life where they struggle. Having a character who just can smash through everything and is not ever emotionally damaged by any comments, who it doesn't internally struggle with feelings of self-worth or inner demons, is not really an interesting character. They are a cardboard cutout. They are not a real person. They are a construct. And people do this regardless of their worldviews. There are lots of people among the Christian audiences, of which I'm a Christian, but there are lots of Christian people who present all of the Christians in their books as white knights in shining armor who never stumble and who don't seem to even stink, have any body odor. And then there are people on the liberal side who make characters who are make everyone on the opposite side seem like they're trolls and present these people on their side as enlightened and rebels for the society. And honestly, that is not going to be, but having someone who doesn't have a weakness, someone who doesn't struggle, ask questions, is not interesting, regardless of which side of the political aisle or the religious aisle you are on. If you want to have characters who are relatable, you want us to have characters who have weakness. Nobody in life is good at everything. I'm not good at everything. Nobody in life is going to identify with someone who is good at every innate thing that they pick up. So, you want to give your characters an area where they struggle. For example, you either want to make them super powerful with an inner or spiritual weakness, or you want to give them a great moral strength with an external weakness. Great examples of this. Superman and Captain Marvel are not as relatable as Batman and Captain America. Superman and Captain Marvel are these people who are presented as extremely powerful and with great moral fiber, supposedly. And both of these characters don't have any weaknesses that we can tell. Even though someone might say they're not entirely likable, it's just the fact that they are presented as they are perfect in every way. But having someone who is like Captain America and Batman is different. Captain America is someone who has superhuman abilities, but he is no, he's actually Captain America is someone who has superhuman abilities, but he's not as invulnerable as Superman. But he has great moral strength. When we watch Captain America film, he's more interesting than Superman because he's not just a man who can do the right thing and won't ever and is bulletproof. He's a man who does the right thing. He makes that moral decision to do the right thing, but he also could die in the process, which makes the film a lot more interesting. Another character is Batman. Batman is a person with great external strength. Even though he doesn't have superpowers, the man is a mythic gothic legend. But he has an internal struggle. The struggle of him overcoming his depression, him overcoming his fear in the Batman Begins franchise, or him overcoming the anger that he is in his heart. His strength is external, but we see his internal struggle, and that makes him more relatable and likable. A great book character who's an example of this is Raoden from Brandon Sanderson's Elantris series. In the story, Raoden is cursed with this magical curse and is thrown into this cursed colony of Elantris. And the story focuses on the fact that Raoden is rising up against the despair he feels. He is physically flawed. He is also struggling with depression on the inside, but his strength is that he rises up and keeps doing the right thing. Raoden doesn't really struggle to do the right thing, but he does the right thing. And the story is made more interesting because of the fact of the world is trying to beat Raoden down, and he is choosing to rise back up. As an antithesis to this is Kaladin, again written by Brandon Sanderson in the Stormlight Archive. Kaladin is a person of great physical prowess. He's a spearman, he's a surgeon, he's amazing, but he struggles with depression on the inside. And the story is about Kaladin overcoming his internal struggle of depression in order to rise up and help others. Tip number 9, give them a belief. Characters who believe something are going to be more interesting than characters who don't believe anything. Or characters who believe something, but we don't really understand it. Again, this is kind of ties into the give them something to fight for. If we don't know why this character is fighting, we're not going to be as interested. And giving your character a belief is going to make them a lot more interesting than if you just write them as a character who's just kind of doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. Okay, tip number 10, don't write them to a gender. This is an interesting topic because on the one hand, it is true that men and women think differently. There is a chemical component to our brains that makes us process things a little bit differently. But that being said, we're not completely alien species. Now, and you're not going to find males who are going to be more sensitive and feeling, even though the manly expectation is that you're going to be more stoic and logical. And you're going to find women who are more logical and stoic, as opposed to the stereotype of women being more feeling and emotional. And also, not every trait of a male's character is going to be the same as every other male's personality. Not every woman is going to match every other woman out there in the world. This is the problem, again, of writing someone to a role. We can't, and in the same way, we can't write them to a gender. You can't write, their differences between us are not astronomical. They are different. We are different, but we're not that different. Your personality is going to activate your character and define your character more than your gender. And again, there's no 50-50 split among these things. This is why it's true that a male character can write a female character, and a female writer can write a male character. You just want to make sure that you're fact checking to make sure that you're not getting anything wrong. But no, but we're not aliens from each other. So you don't want to write someone to a role. You don't want to write the male as a person who's just not interested in romance, who's just interested in pretty faces and just likes to go through life smashing things or achieving great business acumen or um, being having a successful military career or anything like that. And you don't want to just write your woman to a thought of she wants to have a family or find someone to love. That doesn't make any sense in the real world, and it doesn't make sense to do that in stories. Write your males and your female characters to a personality type. Ask yourself, what is it about this character that makes him want to do what he does? How does this female character see the world? How does this male character think? How does this female character think and measure achievement? All these things are important things to ask yourself as you write your characters. Okay, so those are my 10 tips on how to write a compelling character. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please leave a like and comment below on what you'd like for me to talk about next time, whether it be more on character or whether it be on some other aspect of story. I hope you have a great day, and God bless.